Watch this Middle Eastern student approaching Christmas trees with accelerant and matches. His name is Hadi. He just planned to burn multiple trees to terrorize Christian families. Then his matches refused to light, forcing him to his knees.
My name is Hadi. I'm 24 years old, and on July 5th, 2023, I experienced something that completely destroyed my worldview. I was a computer science student at UC Berkeley and a radical Muslim activist. That Christmas Eve, an invisible force stopped me from committing terrorism in Union Square. I arrived in San Francisco from Karachi, Pakistan in September 2022 with what my father thought was a simple academic mission. He had saved for years to send me to UC Berkeley to study computer science, believing that an American education would give our family opportunities we never had in Pakistan. He was so proud when I received my student visa, telling everyone in our neighborhood that his son was going to become a successful engineer in America. But I had a secret mission that my father knew nothing about, one that would have horrified him if he had understood what was really driving me to leave Pakistan. I believed America was the enemy of Islam and needed to be resisted from within. This wasn't something I had come up with on my own. For years before leaving Pakistan, I had been attending study groups at our local mosque where the imam would explain how Western culture was systematically destroying Islamic values around the world. He would show us videos of Muslims in Europe being forced to abandon their traditions, of Islamic countries being invaded by Western armies, of Hollywood movies that mocked our faith. I became convinced that America was leading a cultural crusade against Islam, and I wanted to be part of the resistance. My father sent me to study computer science, but my real goal was to learn how to use technology to fight back against what I saw as Christian imperialism. I spent hours researching cybersecurity, not to protect systems, but to learn how to attack them. I studied American infrastructure, communication networks, and social media platforms, thinking I could use my technical knowledge to disrupt the systems that I believed were spreading anti-Islamic propaganda. I was essentially planning to become a cyber terrorist, though I never used that word to describe myself at the time. My mosque leader back in Karachi had specifically taught that Christmas was an attack on our faith. He explained that Christians used holiday celebrations to make their religion seem attractive to young Muslims, especially those living in Western countries. He said that Christmas trees, decorations, and holiday music were all tools of conversion, designed to make Islam look boring and outdated compared to the colorful festivities of Christianity. He warned us that exposure to Christmas celebrations could weaken our faith and make us vulnerable to Christian missionaries. He said American Christians were trying to convert Muslim youth through culture rather than direct preaching. According to his teaching, every Christmas movie, every holiday song, every decorated store window was part of a coordinated campaign to make Christianity seem fun and welcoming while portraying Islam as strict and joyless. He told us that Muslim students in America needed to actively resist these cultural influences, not just avoid them, but actively fight against them to protect other Muslims from being deceived. I joined a student group called Defenders of True Faith at UC Berkeley within my first month on campus. This wasn't an official university organization, but rather a secret society of Muslim students who met weekly to discuss ways to combat what we saw as Christian cultural aggression. The group was led by a graduate student from Bangladesh who had been in America for 5 years and claimed to have inside knowledge of how Christian organizations were targeting Muslim students for conversion. We protested outside churches every Sunday morning, holding signs that warned Muslims about the dangers of Christian influence. We would stand on the sidewalk outside various churches in Berkeley and San Francisco, passing out flyers to anyone who looked like they might be Muslim. Our flyers explained why Christianity was false and dangerous, using verses from the Quran and quotes from Islamic scholars to prove that Christians had corrupted the original message of Jesus. I felt righteous and important during these protests, like I was protecting my fellow Muslims from spiritual deception. I handed out flyers explaining why Christianity was false and dangerous to anyone who would take them. The flyers contained detailed arguments against core Christian beliefs like the Trinity, the divinity of Jesus, and salvation by grace. I had memorized dozens of Bible verses that I could use to show contradictions in Christian theology. I was particularly proud of my ability to debate with Christians who approached our protest signs, using my knowledge of both Islam and Christianity to defeat their arguments and expose what I believed were the logical flaws in their faith. My roommate was a Christian from Texas named Michael, and I made his life absolutely miserable with constant arguments about religion. The housing office had randomly assigned us to share a dorm room, and I saw this as a perfect opportunity to convert a Christian to Islam, or at least to plant seeds of doubt about his faith. Every conversation we had turned into a theological debate. I would challenge everything he believed, mock his prayers before meals, and leave Islamic literature on his desk. I thought I was doing him a favor by exposing him to the truth of Islam, but I was really just being cruel and intolerant. I had convinced myself that opposing Christianity was my holy duty as a faithful Muslim. In my mind, I wasn't being hateful or intolerant. I was being a good Muslim who was protecting my faith and the faith of others from Christian lies and deception. I believed that Allah had sent me to America specifically to resist Christian influence and to demonstrate that Islam was superior to Christianity in every way. I felt like a soldier in a religious war, fighting on the front lines of a spiritual battlefield. Every Christmas decoration I saw felt like a personal insult to my beliefs and my identity as a Muslim. Walking through San Francisco during the holiday season was torture for me. The decorated store windows, the Christmas trees, the holiday music playing in every shop, the cheerful faces of people celebrating what I saw as a false religion, all of it filled me with anger and disgust. I couldn't understand how Muslims could live in this city and not be constantly offended by the overwhelming presence of Christian symbolism everywhere they looked. I started planning ways to disrupt Christian celebrations in the city as early as October 2023. My first ideas were relatively small, like organizing counter-protests during Christmas parades or putting up signs near Christmas displays that explained the Islamic perspective on Jesus. But as December approached and the Christmas decorations became more elaborate and widespread, my plans became more aggressive. I began researching the locations of the largest Christmas celebrations in San Francisco, studying their security arrangements, and thinking about how a small group of dedicated Muslims could make a big impact. You have to understand that in my mind, I wasn't planning terrorism or violence against innocent people. I thought I was planning religious resistance against a culture that was actively hostile to my faith. I had convinced myself that Christians were aggressors who were attacking Islam through their celebrations, and that fighting back was not only justified but required. I couldn't see that I was the one filled with hatred and aggression, that I was the one planning to hurt innocent families who were simply celebrating their faith tradition. I was completely blind to my own extremism because I had wrapped it in religious justification and convinced myself that I was the victim defending against Christian oppression. In November 2023, our student group leader, a graduate student from Bangladesh named Ahmed, called an emergency meeting that would change the trajectory of my entire life. We met in the basement of an off-campus apartment building, away from university surveillance and curious ears. Ahmed had been in America for 5 years and claimed to have connections with Islamic resistance movements in other countries. He spoke with the authority of someone who had been fighting this cultural war much longer than the rest of us. Ahmed proposed what he called Operation Christmas Cleansing, a coordinated effort to disrupt Christmas celebrations across San Francisco in a way that would send a clear message to the Christian community. He explained that symbolic attacks on Christmas displays would demonstrate that Muslims would not passively accept Christian cultural dominance. He said that burning Christmas trees in public spaces would be a powerful statement that would inspire other Muslims to resist, and would show Christians that their celebrations were not welcome in a diverse society. 4 of us volunteered for the mission. Myself, a 22-year-old student from Afghanistan who had arrived just 6 months earlier, a graduate student from Syria studying engineering, and an undergraduate from Iran majoring in political science. We all shared a burning hatred for what we saw as American Christian imperialism. The student from Afghanistan had lost family members in drone strikes and blamed American Christians for supporting military action in his country. The Syrian student had fled civil war and believed that American Christians had abandoned Middle Eastern Christians while promoting their own agenda. The Iranian student came from a family that had been persecuted after the revolution and saw American Christianity as a continuation of Western colonialism. We spent weeks studying Union Square's layout and security arrangements with the thoroughness of military planners. We visited the square at different times of day and night, noting the positions of security cameras, the patrol patterns of police officers, and the flow of pedestrian traffic. We identified escape routes and studied the placement of Christmas decorations to determine which targets would have the maximum visual impact with the minimum risk of getting caught before completing our mission. My engineering background from UC Berkeley helped us calculate exactly how much accelerant we would need to ensure the Christmas trees would burn completely. I used my knowledge of combustion science and materials engineering to determine that plastic bottles filled with gasoline would create the hottest flames and spread fire most quickly through the evergreen branches. I felt proud that my American education was contributing to a mission that would strike back at American Christian culture. We planned to strike on Christmas Eve when the most families would be present in Union Square for the annual Christmas celebration. Ahmed explained that maximum emotional impact required maximum civilian presence. We wanted Christian families to see their sacred symbols burning, to feel afraid and unwelcome, to understand that their dominance was being challenged. The presence of children was particularly important to our strategy because we believed that traumatizing Christian children would send the strongest possible message to the adult Christian community. I volunteered to be the primary operative because I felt the most passionate about the mission and because I believed I had the best chance of escaping afterward. My student from Afghanistan was too nervous and easily recognizable. The Syrian student had an accent that might draw attention. The Iranian student was too well known on campus through his political activism. I had maintained a lower profile and spoke English without a detectable accent, making me the logical choice to carry out the actual burning while the others provided lookout and distraction support. I told my fellow students that I was ready to die for this cause if necessary. We had all heard stories of Islamic martyrs who had given their lives to resist Western oppression, and I genuinely believed that burning Christmas trees in San Francisco would make me part of that honored tradition. I wasn't planning to die, but I was prepared for the possibility that I might be shot by police or arrested and sentenced to life in prison. In my mind, any sacrifice would be worth striking this blow for Islamic resistance. The night before our planned attack, I recorded a video on my laptop explaining why I was doing this and what it meant for the larger struggle between Islam and Christianity. I spoke directly into the camera for almost 20 minutes, explaining how American Christians had declared war on Islam through their cultural celebrations and military interventions. I quoted verses from the Quran about fighting against oppression and defending the faith. I wanted my family in Pakistan to understand that I had died as a faithful Muslim warrior, not as a terrorist or criminal. December 24th, 2023, we met at 8 p.m. in Golden Gate Park, away from the crowds and security of Union Square. Each of us carried backpacks containing plastic bottles filled with gasoline and multiple boxes of matches. We had tested our materials the previous week in a remote area outside the city to ensure everything would work properly. The gasoline was stored in sports drink bottles to avoid suspicion, and we had practiced pouring and igniting techniques to minimize the time between approach and escape. I felt like a soldier preparing for the most important battle of my life as we walked through Golden Gate Park toward our target. My heart was racing with excitement and nervousness, but I felt completely confident in the righteousness of our mission. I believed that in a few hours, the entire Muslim community in America would know my name and be inspired by my courage. I imagined my story being told in mosques across the country as an example of how young Muslims could fight back against Christian cultural oppression. We reviewed our plan one final time before leaving the park. I would approach the largest Christmas tree in Union Square and pour gasoline around its base while my fellow students created distractions at different points around the square. After igniting the first tree, I would move quickly to secondary targets while they provided lookout support and escape assistance. We had mapped 3 different exit routes depending on how quickly security responded to the fires. Ahmed gave us a final blessing in Arabic, asking Allah to grant us success in our mission and to protect us from harm. We embraced each other like brothers going into battle, knowing that this night would either make us heroes of Islamic resistance or martyrs for the cause. I had never felt more certain about anything in my entire life than I felt about the righteousness of what we were about to do. Have you ever been so convinced you were right that you couldn't see how wrong you were? That was me walking toward Union Square with a backpack full of gasoline, believing I was about to strike a blow for justice when I was really about to commit an act of terrorism against innocent families celebrating their faith. I couldn't see that I had become exactly what I claimed to oppose, a person using violence and fear to impose my religious beliefs on others. I was completely blind to my own extremism because I had convinced myself that I was the victim fighting back against oppression rather than the oppressor planning to traumatize children and destroy property. At 9:15 p.m. on Christmas Eve, Union Square was transformed into something that looked like a scene from a holiday movie. The entire plaza was packed with Christmas shoppers and families who had come to see the famous Christmas tree and enjoy the festive atmosphere that San Francisco was known for during the holiday season. Thousands of twinkling lights created a magical glow that reflected off the faces of children and adults alike. Street performers were playing Christmas carols on violins and guitars, their music mixing with the laughter and conversations of hundreds of happy families. Children were singing carols in small groups, their young voices carrying traditional Christmas songs that echoed off the surrounding buildings. I could see couples taking romantic photos by the decorated trees, parents lifting their toddlers to get better views of the ornaments, and grandparents sitting on benches watching their families enjoy the celebration. The entire scene represented everything I had been taught to hate about American Christian culture: the joy, the community, the public display of faith, the way Christianity seemed to bring people together in celebration. I felt disgusted by what I saw as false Christian celebration designed to make their religion appear attractive and welcoming. In my radicalized mind, every smile was propaganda. Every family photo was recruitment. Every Christmas song was indoctrination. I had convinced myself that these innocent families were participating in a cultural assault on Islam, that their celebration was somehow an attack on my faith and identity. The beautiful scene before me filled me with anger rather than appreciation for human joy and community. The largest Christmas tree was positioned in the center of the square, standing approximately 25 feet tall and covered in thousands of white and colored lights that created a stunning display visible from blocks away. The tree was surrounded by a circular area where families gathered to take photos and children ran around playing games while their parents watched and laughed. This tree was our primary target because Ahmed had explained that destroying the centerpiece of the celebration would create maximum psychological impact on the Christian community. Families were gathered around the magnificent tree, taking pictures with their children, creating memories that would last a lifetime. I watched a young father lift his 3-year-old daughter onto his shoulders so she could see the angel on top of the tree. The little girl clapped her hands with delight and pointed at the beautiful ornaments, her face glowing with the wonder that only children can experience. A mother nearby was helping her twin sons pose for a photo in front of the tree, while their grandmother watched with tears of joy in her eyes. I walked casually toward the tree, trying to look like just another holiday visitor who was admiring the decorations. I had practiced this approach dozens of times, knowing that the key to success was appearing completely normal until the moment of action. I carried my backpack loosely over one shoulder, and I had rehearsed pulling out the gasoline bottle with smooth, natural movements that wouldn't attract attention from security cameras or nearby police officers. My heart was racing with anticipation and nervousness, but I felt completely committed to the mission. Every step toward that tree felt like a step toward becoming a hero of Islamic resistance. I imagined the headlines the next day, the outrage in the Christian community, the pride in Muslim communities around the world when they learned that someone had finally fought back against Christian cultural domination. I thought about my fellow students watching from their positions around the square, ready to document my success and assist in my escape. As I reached the perimeter of the tree area, I unscrewed the cap of my gasoline container, which was disguised as a large sports drink bottle. The smell of gasoline was strong, but I hoped it would be masked by the cold December air and the various food smells from nearby vendors. I had calculated that I needed to pour the gasoline in a circle around the base of the tree to ensure that the fire would spread evenly and burn the entire structure before anyone could extinguish it. I moved closer to the tree and began pouring the gasoline around its base, trying to work quickly while still appearing casual. The families around me were completely absorbed in their celebrations, taking photos and enjoying the holiday atmosphere. No one was paying attention to my actions because they had no reason to suspect that someone would try to destroy their peaceful celebration. Their trust and innocence made me feel powerful and in control of the situation. A young Christian father was lifting his 5-year-old daughter so she could touch one of the lower branches of the tree, just a few feet from where I was pouring gasoline. The little girl was laughing and reaching for the ornaments while her father supported her safely. A mother was standing nearby with a camera, capturing this precious moment for their family photo album. They represented everything I thought I was fighting against: the normalization of Christian culture, the way Christian families celebrated their faith openly and joyfully. I finished pouring the gasoline and pulled out my first box of matches, feeling my heart pounding with excitement and anticipation. This was the moment I had been preparing for, the moment when I would strike a blow for Islamic resistance that would be remembered for years. I expected the matches to light easily, the fire to spread quickly, and chaos to erupt as families realized what was happening. I had visualized this moment dozens of times, imagining the flames shooting up through the tree branches and the terrified screams of Christian families. I struck the first match against the rough side of the matchbox, expecting to see the familiar small flame that would begin the destruction. But nothing happened. The match scraped against the striker surface exactly as it should have, but no flame appeared. I tried again with more force, thinking perhaps I hadn't struck it hard enough, but again, nothing happened. The match felt normal in my hands, and the striker surface appeared to be working properly, but no spark would ignite. I quickly tried a second match, then a third, then a fourth, becoming increasingly frantic with each failed attempt. I had tested these same matches just days earlier, and they had worked perfectly. The matchbox was completely dry, and there was no wind that could have extinguished a flame immediately. Every physical condition was perfect for lighting a match, but somehow I could not produce even the smallest spark. My hands started sweating despite the cold December air as I realized something impossible was happening. I tried a different matchbox from my pocket, thinking perhaps the first one had been damaged somehow, but the same impossible thing happened. Match after match scraped against the striker surface without producing any flame or even a spark. I tried different matches from different parts of the box, thinking perhaps only certain matches were defective, but nothing would ignite. My hands were beginning to tremble with confusion and growing panic as I realized that something supernatural was preventing me from completing my mission. People around me were beginning to notice my strange behavior near the tree. I was kneeling by the base of the Christmas tree, frantically trying to light match after match while the smell of gasoline became more noticeable. A security guard started walking in my direction, and several families began moving away from the area where I was crouched. My carefully planned mission was falling apart, but I couldn't understand why the simplest part of the plan, lighting a match, had become impossible. In that moment of growing panic and confusion, I had no idea that I was about to experience the most powerful supernatural intervention of my entire life. I thought I was just having equipment failure, but something far greater than matchboxes and gasoline was at work in Union Square that Christmas Eve. The same Jesus I had spent months mocking and planning to attack was about to reveal himself to me in a way that would shatter every belief I had about God, religion, and my own destiny. As I knelt there frantically trying to light match after match with no success, something far more terrifying than equipment failure began to happen to my body. My hands, which had been trembling slightly from nervousness, suddenly began burning with an intense, invisible fire that defied all logic and explanation. The pain was unlike anything I had ever experienced in my 24 years of life. It felt like my hands had been thrust into a furnace, but when I looked down at them, there were no flames, no smoke, no visible source of the excruciating heat that was consuming my flesh. The burning sensation was not like touching a hot stove or being scalded by boiling water. This was a heat that seemed to come from within my hands themselves, as if every nerve ending was being set ablaze by an invisible force that penetrated through my skin, muscles, and bones. I could feel the pain shooting up through my wrists and into my forearms like bolts of electrical fire, but there were absolutely no physical marks, burns, or blisters appearing on my skin. The contradiction between the intensity of the pain and the complete absence of any visible cause sent me into a state of panic and confusion that I had never experienced before. I dropped the matchbox immediately, not from choice, but because my hands could no longer grip anything. The plastic container of gasoline fell from my other hand and rolled away across the concrete plaza. The pain was so overwhelming that I couldn't focus on anything else, couldn't think about my mission or my escape plan or the families around me. Every thought in my mind was consumed by the impossible fire that was burning through my hands without leaving any evidence of its presence. I fell to my knees on the cold concrete of Union Square, no longer able to maintain my balance or composure. The impact of my knees hitting the hard surface should have been painful, but I couldn't feel anything except the supernatural fire in my hands. I was wearing jeans that provided some protection from the rough concrete, but I was completely unaware of any physical discomfort from kneeling. The burning in my hands was so intense that it overwhelmed every other sensation in my body. I started screaming in pain and confusion, not understanding what was happening to me or why my hands felt like they were being consumed by invisible flames. My screams were involuntary, coming from the deepest part of my being as my nervous system responded to pain that shouldn't have been possible. I had never been a person who screamed or cried easily, even as a child, but this pain bypassed all my mental defenses and self-control. The sounds coming from my mouth were raw and primal. Like an animal caught in a trap. Families around me backed away quickly, thinking I was having some kind of medical emergency or psychological breakdown. Parents grabbed their children and moved to a safe distance, while several people pulled out their phones to call for help. I could hear voices saying things like, call 911 inches and he needs an ambulance and something's wrong with that man. Their concern was genuine, but they had no way of understanding that what was happening to me was beyond medical explanation. The burning sensation shot up my arms like electricity, spreading from my hands through my wrists and forearms toward my shoulders. It felt like liquid fire was flowing through my blood vessels, following the exact path of my circulatory system as it moved higher up my arms. The pain was methodical and precise, not random or chaotic like a medical condition would be. There was an intelligence behind this suffering, a purposefulness that made it clear this was not a coincidence or accident. In the middle of my agony, while I was kneeling on the concrete and screaming in pain, I heard my name being called with perfect clarity. The voice said, Hadi, in a tone that was firm but not angry, disappointed but not condemning. It wasn't audible to the people around me, and it wasn't coming from any human source. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time, penetrating through the pain and chaos in my mind to reach the deepest part of my consciousness. The voice was not speaking in English or Arabic or Urdu, yet I understood it perfectly. It was as if the meaning was being communicated directly to my spirit, bypassing the normal process of hearing and language comprehension. The voice knew me completely, knew my real name and my real heart and my real intentions. There was no hiding from this voice, no pretending to be someone I wasn't, no justifying my actions with religious or political rhetoric. As soon as I heard my name spoken by that supernatural voice, the physical pain in my hands stopped completely. The transition was instantaneous, like someone had flipped a switch and turned off the invisible fire that had been consuming my flesh. My hands felt completely normal again, with no residual burning, tingling, or discomfort. The sudden absence of pain was almost as shocking as the pain itself had been, leaving me gasping and confused as I tried to process what had just happened. But while the physical pain had stopped, a different kind of burning had just begun in my heart. As I knelt there on the concrete, surrounded by the families I had planned to terrorize, I began to see myself clearly for the first time in my life. I looked up and saw the Christian father who had been lifting his daughter to see the tree ornaments. He was now standing protectively in front of his little girl, his arms spread wide to shield her from my screaming and erratic behavior. I saw the mother who had been taking family photos now clutching her young son against her chest, his face buried in her coat so he wouldn't have to see the disturbing scene I was creating. I saw the grandmother who had been watching her grandchildren play, now hurrying to gather them together and move them away from the danger she thought I represented. Children were crying. Parents were calling for police, and the beautiful Christmas celebration that I had wanted to destroy was already being destroyed by my very presence. In that moment of perfect clarity, I realized what I had become and what I had been about to do. I wasn't a heroic freedom fighter or a defender of Islamic faith. I was a terrorist who had planned to burn Christmas trees while children and families watched in horror. I had been seconds away from creating the kind of traumatic memories that would haunt these innocent people for the rest of their lives. I had been about to become the very evil that I claimed to oppose. The realization hit me like a physical blow to my chest. I had spent months convincing myself that I was fighting against oppression and hatred, but I was the one filled with oppression and hatred. I had told myself that I was defending Islam from Christian aggression, but I was the aggressor, planning to attack people who had never done anything to hurt me. I had believed I was following Allah's will, but I had been following my own pride and anger disguised as religious devotion. The emotional pain that began in my heart was deeper and more devastating than the physical pain that had just ended in my hands. This was the pain of seeing myself as I really was, stripped of all my justifications and excuses and religious pretenses. I was a young man so consumed by hatred that I had been willing to traumatize children and destroy property to make a point about my faith. I was exactly what I had always claimed Christians were, an extremist trying to force my beliefs on others through fear and violence. Have you ever had a moment where you saw yourself clearly for the first time and realized that everything you thought you knew about yourself was wrong? That's what happened to me on the concrete plaza of Union Square, surrounded by the innocent families I had planned to terrorize. In that moment of supernatural intervention and divine revelation, I understood that Jesus Christ had just stopped me from committing an act of terrorism that would have destroyed multiple lives, including my own. I stayed on my knees, unable to move, as the sound of police sirens grew louder in the distance. My hands felt completely normal, but my heart was completely broken. I knew with absolute certainty that what I had just experienced was supernatural intervention. that the same Jesus I had spent months mocking and planning to attack had just revealed himself to me in undeniable power and mercy. He had stopped me not with anger or revenge, but with a love so strong that he was willing to cause me intense pain to prevent me from destroying my own life and the lives of innocent people. Police officers surrounded me within 5 minutes of my collapse, their weapons drawn and their voices commanding me to show my hands and remain motionless. I didn't resist arrest because I was still in shock from what I had just experienced and because I genuinely couldn't move from my kneeling position. My legs felt like water, and my entire body was trembling from the supernatural encounter that had just shattered every belief I held about God, religion, and my own purpose in life. The officers approached me cautiously, clearly trained to handle potential terrorists. And I realized that in their eyes, that's exactly what I was. They found the gasoline containers and matches in my backpack within seconds of searching my belongings. The plastic bottles still reeked of gasoline, and the evidence of my planned attack was undeniable. The lead officer asked me directly if I had been planning to set fire to the Christmas tree, and I answered honestly that yes, I had been trying to do exactly that. I felt no desire to lie or deny what I had intended to do. The supernatural intervention had left me completely broken and unable to maintain any of the justifications or excuses that I had used to convince myself that my planned attack was righteous. They handcuffed me and read me my rights while families in the background continued to comfort their frightened children and give statements to other officers. I could hear parents explaining to their young sons and daughters that the bad man was being taken away and that they were safe now. Listening to those conversations was more painful than anything the police did to me. These innocent children had been traumatized by my behavior, and their parents now had to explain to them that there were people in the world who wanted to hurt them because of their faith. I didn't resist arrest because I couldn't even stand up on my own without assistance from the officers. They had to lift me to my feet and support me as we walked toward their patrol car because my legs were still shaking uncontrollably from the supernatural encounter. Every step away from that Christmas tree felt like I was leaving behind the person I had been for the past 15 months and walking toward a completely unknown future. I had no idea what would happen to me legally, but I knew that spiritually, everything had changed forever. As they put me in the back of the police car, I could see through the window that the Christmas celebration was slowly returning to normal. Families were coming back to take photos by the tree that I had failed to destroy. Children were laughing again, parents were smiling, and the beautiful holiday atmosphere was being restored. The tree stood there magnificently, completely untouched by my attack, as if Jesus himself had protected it from my hatred and violence. In my jail cell that Christmas morning, I couldn't stop replaying what had happened in Union Square. I sat on the narrow bunk bed, staring at my hands, which looked completely normal despite having felt like they were burning with supernatural fire just hours earlier. There were no marks, no blisters, no evidence whatsoever that anything unusual had happened to them. But I knew with absolute certainty that what I had experienced was real, and that it had come from a source beyond human understanding. My hands felt completely normal, but my heart was completely broken in a way that I had never experienced before. It wasn't broken from sadness or disappointment, but from the weight of seeing myself clearly for the first time in my adult life. I had been so convinced that I was fighting for justice and defending my faith, but the supernatural intervention had revealed that I was actually consumed by hatred and pride. I had been planning to commit an act of terrorism while convincing myself that I was a righteous warrior. I realized in that cold jail cell that what I had experienced was supernatural intervention from the very God I had been trying to attack. The voice that had called my name was not Allah as I understood him from my Islamic upbringing, but Jesus Christ, the same person I had spent months mocking and planning to dishonor. He had revealed himself to me not with condemnation or revenge, but with power that was clearly intended to stop me from destroying my own life and the lives of innocent people. Processing this realization was the most difficult mental and spiritual work I had ever done. Everything I thought I knew about God, about Christianity, about my own identity and purpose was being challenged by what had happened in Union Square. I couldn't deny the reality of what I had experienced, but accepting it meant acknowledging that everything I had believed and worked toward for the past year had been fundamentally wrong. On December 26th, the day after Christmas, I received an unexpected visitor that would change the trajectory of my spiritual journey forever. A prison chaplain came to my cell and introduced himself as Pastor David. When I looked at his face, I recognized him immediately as the Christian father I had seen protecting his young daughter during my attempted attack on the Christmas tree. The same man whose child I had been planning to traumatize was now standing in my jail cell offering to speak with me. Instead of anger or hatred or desire for revenge, Pastor David showed me kindness that I didn't deserve and couldn't understand. He sat down across from me in that small jail cell and asked how I was feeling, if I was being treated well by the guards, and if there was anything I needed. His concern seemed genuine, not calculated or manipulative. He was treating me like a human being worth caring about, even though I had tried to destroy something sacred to him and had terrified his family. I asked him directly why he was being kind to me after what I had done, and his answer changed everything. He told me that Jesus Christ had commanded his followers to love their enemies and to pray for those who persecute them. He said that he had been praying for me since the moment he saw me collapse in Union Square, asking God to reveal himself to me and to heal whatever hatred was consuming my heart. He explained that he had come to visit me not because he was required to, but because he genuinely cared about my soul and wanted to help me understand what had happened to me. Pastor David brought me a Bible translated into Urdu, knowing from my arrest record that I was originally from Pakistan. He said he wanted me to be able to read about Jesus in my own language so that cultural and linguistic barriers wouldn't prevent me from understanding the truth. I initially told him that I was only interested in reading it to find arguments against Christianity, to prove that my Islamic beliefs were superior to his Christian faith. He smiled and told me that was exactly how he hoped I would read it, because he was confident that Jesus would reveal himself through his own words. I started reading that Bible with the specific goal of finding weaknesses and contradictions that I could use to defend my Islamic worldview and prove that Pastor David was wrong about Jesus. I approached it like a debater preparing for an argument, looking for logical flaws and inconsistencies that would allow me to maintain my previous beliefs. But as I read the words of Jesus recorded in the Gospels, something unexpected began happening in my heart. Instead of finding arguments against Christianity, I found forgiveness, love, and redemption that I had never encountered in any religious teaching before. The Jesus portrayed in the Bible was nothing like the weak, defeated figure I had been taught to despise. He was powerful enough to heal the sick and raise the dead, but gentle enough to welcome children and forgive his enemies. He was confident enough to confront religious hypocrites, but humble enough to wash his disciples' feet. He was everything I had never imagined a Savior could be. After 2 weeks of intensive Bible study and daily conversations with Pastor David, I understood that Jesus Christ had personally intervened in my life that Christmas Eve in Union Square. He had stopped my hands from lighting the matches, not because he was afraid of my attack, but because he loved me too much to let me destroy my own life and the lives of innocent families. The burning in my hands had been his way of getting my attention, of breaking through my hatred and pride to reach my heart with his love. On January 8th, 2024, exactly 2 weeks after my supernatural encounter in Union Square, I made the most important decision of my entire life. I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, acknowledging that he was the Son of God who had died for my sins and risen from the dead to offer me eternal life. Pastor David baptized me in a small pool that the jail chaplaincy used for inmate baptisms. And as I went under that water, I felt my old life of hatred and extremism dying and a new life of love and peace being born. Ask yourself this question, because it's the same question I had to face in that jail cell. When did someone last show you grace that you didn't earn and forgiveness that you didn't deserve? Pastor David could have demanded justice, could have pressed for the maximum possible sentence, could have made sure I was deported back to Pakistan to face whatever consequences awaited me there. Instead, he showed me the love of Jesus Christ through his own actions, demonstrating that Christianity was not the weak and hypocritical religion I had been taught to despise, but a faith that had the power to transform hatred into love and enemies into family. My family in Pakistan disowned me immediately and completely when they learned of my conversion to Christianity through a phone call I made from jail 3 days after my baptism. I had waited to tell them because I wanted to be certain about my decision and because I knew that their reaction would be devastating. When I finally called my father and explained that I had accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, there was a long silence on the other end of the phone that felt like it lasted for hours. My father's voice, when he finally spoke, was filled with a combination of rage, heartbreak, and complete bewilderment. He told me that I had brought unspeakable shame upon our entire family name, and that my conversion was worse than if I had died in the planned terrorist attack. He said that having a son become a Christian was a disgrace that would follow our family for generations, and that he wished I had never been born rather than live to see this day. My father sent a message through my uncle saying that I was dead to them and that they never wanted to see my face again or hear my voice as long as they lived. He told everyone in our neighborhood and extended family that his son had died in America, which was easier for them to accept than the truth that his son had converted to Christianity. My mother, who had sacrificed so much to send me to America for education, refused to take my phone calls and sent word that she was in mourning for her lost son. The rejection from my family was more painful than anything I had experienced during my arrest or imprisonment. These were the people who had raised me, loved me, and supported my dreams of success in America. Now they viewed me as a traitor to everything they valued and believed. I understood their reaction because I remembered how I had felt about Muslim converts to Christianity just weeks earlier, but understanding didn't make the pain of their rejection any less devastating. My student visa was revoked by immigration authorities as a direct result of my arrest on terrorism charges, and I faced deportation back to Pakistan within 30 days of my scheduled release from jail. The immigration attorney assigned to my case explained that my conviction would make it nearly impossible for me to remain in the United States legally, and that returning to Pakistan as a known Christian convert could be extremely dangerous for my personal safety. I was sentenced to 18 months in San Francisco County Jail and ordered to pay $50,000 in restitution to the city for the cost of the emergency response and increased security at Union Square during the Christmas celebration. The judge made it clear that my sentence was relatively lenient only because I had not actually succeeded in setting any fires and because Pastor David and several other Christian families had written letters to the court requesting mercy on my behalf. I pled guilty to all charges including attempted arson, terrorism-related offenses, and destruction of public property, even though my public defender suggested that I might be able to negotiate a plea deal with reduced charges. I wanted to take full responsibility for what I had planned to do regardless of the legal consequences, because my conversion to Christianity had given me a desire to be completely honest about my actions and their potential consequences. The local media coverage of my case was intense and often sensationalized, with headlines like "Christmas Terrorist Finds Jesus" and "Muslim Student's Dramatic Conversion Behind Bars." News crews waited outside the jail during my court appearances, and my story was featured on local television stations and newspapers throughout the Bay Area. The attention was embarrassing and difficult, but it also gave me opportunities to share my testimony with a wider audience than I ever could have reached otherwise. In prison, I started a weekly Bible study group that met in the chapel every Thursday evening for any inmates who wanted to learn about Christianity or discuss their own spiritual questions. The group started with just Pastor David and myself, but within a few months we had 12 regular attendees from various religious and cultural backgrounds. 5 Muslim inmates accepted Christ through our Bible study discussions, and 2 others began seriously considering conversion before I was released. My former fellow students from the Defenders of True Faith group completely cut off all contact with me once news of my conversion spread through the UC Berkeley Muslim community. Ahmed, our former leader who had planned Operation Christmas Cleansing, sent word through mutual acquaintances that I was now considered an enemy of Islam and that any contact with me would be viewed as betrayal of their cause. They viewed my conversion as the ultimate proof that American culture had corrupted and destroyed my Islamic faith. I was released from jail in June 2024, 3 months earlier than my original sentence due to good behavior and my participation in various prison ministry and educational programs. Pastor David was waiting for me at the jail entrance with his wife and daughter, the same little girl I had been planning to traumatize with my Christmas tree burning. She ran up to me and hugged my legs, calling me Uncle Hadi and telling me she had been praying for me every night since Christmas Eve. I now work full-time with Pastor David's church doing outreach ministry to Muslim students and recent immigrants who are struggling with questions about faith, identity, and belonging in American culture. My personal experience with radicalization and conversion gives me credibility with young Muslims who are angry, confused, or drawn toward extremist ideologies. I can speak to them in their own language, both literally and culturally, about the emptiness of hatred and the fulfillment that comes from following Jesus Christ. The Christian families I had planned to terrorize that Christmas Eve have become my closest friends and strongest supporters in my new life. They invite me to their holiday celebrations, include me in their family gatherings, and treat me like a beloved brother rather than a former enemy. Their forgiveness and acceptance have shown me what the love of Christ looks like in practical, everyday relationships. I visit mosques and universities throughout the Bay Area, sharing my testimony about how Jesus Christ transformed my heart from hatred to love and my purpose from destruction to healing. These speaking opportunities are often challenging because many Muslims view me as a traitor, but I have seen 12 young Muslim men accept Christ as their savior through hearing my story. Each conversion reminds me that my own suffering and losses were worthwhile if they can be used to bring others to the truth. My former roommate Michael, the Christian student from Texas whom I had tormented with constant religious arguments and deliberate cruelty, has become my closest friend and ministry partner. When he learned about my conversion and the circumstances surrounding it, he immediately forgave me for the months of harassment I had put him through. He now helps me prepare for speaking engagements and accompanies me to university campuses where we share our story of how God can transform even the most hostile relationships. So I'm asking you, just as someone who learned this truth in the hardest way possible, don't wait for Jesus to stop you like he stopped me that Christmas Eve in Union Square. Don't wait for him to bring you to your knees through supernatural intervention before you recognize that he is Lord. The same power that prevented my hands from lighting those matches is available to transform your heart from whatever darkness is consuming you right now. Don't spend years of your life consumed by hatred, anger, or extremism like I did. Don't waste your time and energy planning to hurt innocent people or destroy beautiful things because you think it will advance your cause or prove your point. Look inside your own heart right now and ask yourself what hatred or bitterness you're carrying that Jesus wants to heal and transform. Whether you're Muslim like I was, or atheist, or just angry at Christians or the world in general, Jesus Christ is calling you to surrender your heart to him today. He doesn't want to condemn you for your hatred or punish you for your plans to hurt others. He wants to transform your terrorism into testimony, your destruction into redemption, your anger into love, just like he did for me on that Christmas Eve when he stopped my hands from lighting matches and lit my heart with his love instead. He's waiting for you to stop running from his love and start surrendering to his lordship. That same Jesus who prevented me from committing terrorism is reaching out his nail-scarred hands toward your heart right now, offering you forgiveness for your sins and transformation for your life that will be more dramatic and beautiful than anything you can imagine.